Hi, I'm Andy Schmuckler. Uh, I call myself these days a man on a mission, uh, which is to convey a big picture view of what the story of our species shows us about what we're up against. That book back there is called "What We're Up Against," and it integrates a view of what's happened to us because we created civilization, which was unprecedented in the history of life, and connects also with the crisis in America right now. I want to talk about something having to do with that crisis in America, which I'm calling the politics of falsehood. You know, I think it was Lincoln who said you can fool some of the people all the time and all the people some of the time, but you can't fool all the people all the time, which seems true enough. But we're in a situation in America right now where you can fool enough of the people all of the time that we've got a real problem. And that problem is that we are in danger of losing our democracy because a lot of people believe a lot of things that are simply not true. I'm going to start by something which triggered my thinking in this way, which is having recently spent a most enjoyable social evening, my wife and I, who are definitely on the democratic liberal side of today's American politics and also lifelong. But I've tended to be more respectful than some liberals about there being virtues on the conservative side that we should learn a little something from, and also some defects on the liberal side that need correcting. But anyway, we were with two other couples, both people in both couples being Republicans, not Trumpy Republicans, but lifelong Republicans, or pretty lifelong anyway. In one case, there was a shift decades ago. You know, like Ronald Reagan was a Democrat during the New Deal era, and I'm not sure I understand exactly why he shifted. But we got together, and this is not the first time this group of three couples has gotten together, and we always have a really wonderful time. They are splendid people, and we have a wonderful time because we've got a rule. Since April, my wife and I initiated this by surprising them by inviting those two couples over. The event was under the rule, we won't talk politics, which is a good rule in this day and age, because we have, really nice feeling among us. And if we were to talk politics, that feeling would get replaced. As there was a moment on this occasion, this very recent occasion, when that kind of threatened, and I backed away. And the circumstance was that I was telling something about my dad. My dad was a professor of economics, and he was a Keynesian economist, and said something about the general thrust of Keynesian economics, which it summarizes as government taxing and spending should be leaning against the tendencies of the business cycle, so that you run deficits when you need to, like in the Great Depression is when Keynes came up with his theory. You need the government to make up for the lack of demand. Otherwise, you get this vicious cycle where people tighten their belts and then nobody's buying anything, and it just keeps on cascading into a depression, which happened again and again and again through the 19th and all the way up to the Great Depression. But if you're at the boom side of the business cycle, then on the contrary, you increase taxes rather than cut them, and you decrease spending rather than government spending rather than increase it, so that ideally practiced, which is difficult because politically it's a lot easier to cut taxes and to raise them. But ideally, what you would do is government would run deficits, run credits, and it would all be like you're on this sailboat and you're leaning against the direction that your little boat is about to tip over. Anyway, I don't recall the exact transition, but very soon, one of our crowd on the other side of the political divide made the statement that he was talking about the Trump tax cut in 2017. He made the statement that, and he was kind of excited. Now, I don't doubt anybody's sincerity in any of this. He made the statement that supply side economics really works. That's how I want to get into talking about the politics of falsehood, because it's not true. I believe that Paul Krugman, who reminds me a lot of my dad, and my dad was brilliant, and Paul Krugman may be more brilliant, probably is, than my dad was. But anyway, Paul Krugman talks about zombie ideas that you can kill them, but they keep on coming. And I believe, I'm pretty sure that one of the places where, and over the last 10 years or something, he's identified this supply side thing as a zombie idea. I mean, it's been disproven so much. I mean, he thought my table mate, who I really like, I mean, he's just a very generous, good-natured guy. I'm a bit impatient with liberals who know the Republicans only by the virtue of their politics, who quarrel with me when I talk about the good, decent conservatives. Anyway, he was lauding the Trump tax cut of 2017 and claiming that it brought in lots of new revenue. You know, this idea you can cut taxes and get more money. Something like that, I believe, happened in the early JFK years. Of course, JFK had only early years because he was assassinated around the end of his third year. But something happened in 1960, a tax cut that the Kennedy administration oversaw that gave people some idea that you could cut taxes and get more revenue. But I forget what I used to know about that. But we've got a history now, much more recent than that's over 60 years ago. The first idea of supply side economics, based on what was called the Laffer curve, Laffer, but it was a laugher in a totally different way. It was a laugher because this thing that got written on a napkin, not a really serious idea, but it was useful to the plutocratic force that's very powerful in the Republican Party and always has been, because the tax cuts are what they like. I mean, we saw that in 2017. It wasn't the Trump tax cut. He was happy to sign it, but it was the one thing that the Republican Party really wanted to do, other than deprive millions of their own supporters of the benefits of Obamacare. Other than that, they had nothing that they wanted. When they controlled both houses of Congress and the presidency, not to mention the Supreme Court, they really had nothing they wanted to do but cut taxes. That's what they like to do. So this idea that Reagan came, and I'm guessing that Reagan actually believed it. I mean, he was not a great intellect. He had his good qualities. I talked with somebody who had served in foreign policy matters with Reagan, a very intelligent man, who told me that why he had come to really respect Reagan. So I don't know much about what Reagan really was like, but a great intellect he was not. And he would have been probably not difficult to sell on the idea of cutting taxes by the plutocratic forces that had backed him since he was, a spokesman for General Electric back in the late 50s. Well, what he did first, he ran for president and beat Jimmy Carter in 1980, and he was running on the idea that we've got to balance the budget and we've got to cut the national deficit. I mean, he was very big on the idea that we shouldn't have such a big national debt. Conservatives were always big on that for a very long time, until I think in the W administration they decided that debt doesn't matter. And how much debt does matter, I'm a little bit agnostic about. We got some economies in the world that are very strong that have bigger national debts in relation to their GDP than the United States does. In any event, the point I'm making is that Reagan was big on we got to cut the national debt. And he got persuaded by these supply side economics people and the Laffer curve that was drawn on a mere napkin at some restaurant in D.C. that he cut taxes. The Reagan tax cut was the result of this supply side economics. And if you look at the national debt when he was inaugurated and the national debt when his successor, the first Bush, was inaugurated, I can't remember the exact, it's between, he doubled the national debt or maybe even tripled it. That was the first go round on this supply side economics that my table mate says it really works. So then in the Clinton years, I don't know how much credit Clinton should get for this, but we started running budget surpluses for the first time. I don't know when we had budget surpluses before. I probably knew at one point, but in any event, it had been a very, very long time before, since the United States government had taken in more in revenue than it put out in spending. But the last, I think, few years of Clinton's presidency, we were running budget surpluses. And we're spending down the national debt. And when Bush, so-called, got elected in 2000, the projections were that we were going to run surpluses as far as the eye could see. They were looking 4 or 8 years. You know, we would pay off the national debt the way we were going. Now, I don't know how much it's known that had W behaved responsibly, things would have unfolded as projected. I mean, projections don't always come true. But I've never come across anything which said that impression that we were going to run surpluses for a good while was false. But as soon as W came in, like the good agent of the plutocracy that he was, his priority was passing a big tax cut. And I remember Alan Greenspan gets up there, and I think he lied. I think he knew better. But anyway, they passed the big Bush 2 tax cut in, I guess, 2001, I guess. And all of a sudden, the surpluses disappeared. The supply side economics did not work for him any better than it worked for Reagan. And I don't recall the exact ratio of how much W increased the national debt, but I believe it was at least he doubled the national debt. So here are 2 tries at this supply side economics, with both had the same result, and they were quite contrary to what my table mate said about supply side economics. It really works. And then in 2017, we get our third go round, where I don't know if anybody actually believed at that point, you know, in terms of the people who actually instituted this big tax cut that transferred $2 trillion out of the pockets of average Americans, but especially out of the pockets of future Americans into the billionaire class and the corporate system. Well, same thing happened as happened before. The national debt, I think Trump's one term in office added $7 or $8 trillion to the national debt. And here's my table mate saying, oh, the 2017 tax cut really produced this much more revenue coming into the government. And the supply side economics really works. So how does that happen? I mean, the guy's not stupid. He's not intellectually sophisticated, but he's got a head on his shoulders. These are not obscure numbers. You can easily find out what the national debt was when so-and-so took office and then what so-and-so left office, and you can see whether supply side economics actually worked. But my point is, he believed it. And that's just an example of something which is essentially pervades the politics of conservative America in these times. I don't think we've ever had a political party that was so dependent on having tens of millions of people believe lies, or I use the word falsehood in the title here because lies, for something to be a lie, somebody has to be deliberately telling people things that they know are not true. I think there's an abundance of that on the political right now, but I don't know that all of it is deliberate falsehood. So I use the word falsehood, which means if somebody says something that's not true, it's a falsehood, whether they believe it or not. I mean, we know, I think, we know that the fossil fuel industry has, just like the tobacco industry, has lied to fool as many people as possible about climate change. And it's still out there. I mean, it's been eroded because, people notice that, the difference between the news and the weather has eroded, The weather makes the news these days, when Hurricane Harvey parks over Houston back a few years ago, or, we've got different weather because we have destabilized the Earth's climate. And so the number of people who are still in denial about it, I mean, they've got all kinds of backups like, oh, well, it isn't human activity, but it's all a lie, starting with the fossil fuel industry. And I'm guessing that the entire upper echelons of the Republican Party know it's a lie, and they're just willing to do the bidding of a fossil fuel industry that's the most fabulously wealthy industry in the world. Maybe it's been overtaken by some of the IT world like Apple and, Google. But anyway, it's a fabulously wealthy, and our politics run on money thanks to the Republican Party's crippling our ability to keep our politics where our citizens are supposed to be more or less equal, protected from the money power, where the inequalities between citizens are huge. We can't really protect our democracy from the plutocracy. We get a Supreme Court that passes Citizens United, and the Supreme Court, the Republicans there essentially lied when they did Citizens United, pretending that they didn't think that opening the floodgates to money would have any effect in terms of corruption. I mean, they're not that stupid, so I assume that's a lie. I mean, it certainly wasn't true. So that's climate change, and if you look at my most recent last Thursday, I did one of my Man on a Mission live streams that I do Mondays and Thursdays at 11 a.m. I talked a lot about the gun issue. There's an issue where they also lie. Got a lot of people voting on the basis of the gun issue because they've been conned into believing that their possession of guns, not just them individually, but the American citizenry being armed without anything interfering with the rights of citizens to bear arms, is a fundamental right that all of our other rights, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, they all depend on our being armed. Even though all you got to do is look at the rest of the world and you can see, you can have people who, like in France and Germany and Denmark and Australia and, all over the world, we got decent, affluent, democratic societies that have much more sane regulations about guns, the kind that the NRA will say, oh, no, you'll lose your liberty. And they're just as free as we are. So we got people who just like, zombie ideas again, just like supply side economics still has an adherence at this dinner table. So also the whole country is paralyzed to do it from doing anything except for thoughts and prayers when we have many multiples times more gun deaths and mass killings through gunfire and preventing or even banning assault weapons, which we did for a little while, based on a lie. Similarly with race relations, I'm not sure exactly what the meaning of systemic racism is. I think that the decent definition of systemic racism would say that if Black parents feel a necessity to give their kids, particularly their sons, the talk, which I, for one, only learned about, since we got all these videos of police shooting unarmed Black people in one circumstance or another. The talk is about basically what you should do if you're pulled over by a policeman, because your life is on the line if you're Black, particularly if you're Black and you're male. And, I never gave my kids that talk. Never even occurred to me to give my kids that talk. I did once have my son pulled over by a policeman out here in Shenandoah County, Virginia, because the evident reason was that he had a Grateful Dead sticker on his rear windshield. I mean, that was reason enough for a policeman to pull him over and give him a little bit of a hard time. And I had an experience back in the days of Vietnam protests, and I had a beard, and I was driving in, I think, Mendocino, California, and a highway patrolman pulled me a car. Knew that hadn't happened. I was supposedly driving on the wrong side of the double yellow line. I wasn't. But I had a beard, and when he saw my face, that was when he started up his car. So I know that if you're white, it doesn't mean you won't ever get hassled. But I never gave my kids the talk. I never worried that they might get shot and killed by a policeman for no good reason. But Black parents, apparently, based on generations of experience, know that there's a danger out there. And if that ain't systemic, I mean, it certainly has got to do with racism. And if it ain't systemic, what is? Well, the same people who give us these other falsehoods make a big deal about there's no systemic racism in America. Well, I mean, there's a lot of history. All you got to do is know some history. I mean, when you got, several thousand young black men that got lynched in the South over the course of some years. I mean, that hasn't been happening lately, but a lot of other things do happen. Um, and cultures don't change overnight, but they're attached to another falsehood. They're not willing to look at the truth. And all of this is independent of the particular Trumpian lies that all these people have, not on all of them. We know from various kinds of polling, exit polls and otherwise, that the majority of the Republican base believes that the election was stolen from Trump by Biden. The obvious truth is that Trump tried to steal the election from Biden, who won it legitimately, fair and square. And they also apparently believe that the prosecutions of Donald Trump are politically motivated, where the obvious truth is that the DOJ had to be dragged reluctantly into going after Trump because he committed the most serious crimes in American history, some of them right in front of our eyes. But the majority of people in the Republican base think it's politically motivated, and they believe this guy when he says, I did nothing wrong. Even though I believe that he'll go down in history as the most prodigious liar that humankind has ever had to look at. So you can fool a lot of people a lot of the time, and it gets to a certain point and you got trouble. I have asked the question, which I'm not going to address here. What makes people vulnerable to lies? And that is the title of an op-ed piece that I publish. I publish a weekly op-ed piece that appears in the newspapers here in a very conservative part of Virginia, one up in my part of the northern end of the Shenandoah Valley and one down in Lynchburg. And I published a piece called What Makes People Vulnerable to Lies. And I don't claim to have a definitive answer, but I venture a variety of things, all the way from certain aspects of family structure and the workings of power in more hierarchical and authoritarian families, to things like cultural influences, like I think the people who live in the former Confederacy have been had their minds formed by a culture which was made significant use of lies from before the Civil War to right after the Civil War and all the way through the post-Civil War period. And people learn how to think and also how not to think, so that you can get intelligent people believing things that you sort of think, how can anybody with any intelligence believe that? So if you're interested in finding out more about how my attempt to illuminate how it is that people can be fooled, too many people, too much of the time. And you could throw in some really brilliant propagandists, like people like Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich and Fox News and Karl Rove. You got some really good people. And I don't understand quite how Trump does what he does, but he's apparently brilliant in some ways, even if he's an effing moron in other ways. So there are a lot of factors that go into producing this, and all of them have to do with brokenness. And I'm a man on a mission. I want to show how a force of brokenness arose when we embarked on the path of civilization, and that everything that we've been dealing with as a species, this difficult history that we've got, and this difficult history that we're living right now in America, really is best understood in that larger context. I hope that you'll check that out. So let me just make a plug for a couple things in terms of checking out my Better Human Story, this integrated picture of what's happened to our species, and also the American crisis. Please go to abetterhumanstory.org. And in terms of me doing these videos, I'll be back here tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. I'm probably going to start off with the issue of student debt and how that's a manifestation of folly in a society like ours. But I will just be freewheeling. I'm not going to even try to be disciplined and coherent in terms of like all systematically developing one idea before I turn to another. This integrative picture has got a lot of pieces to it, and systematically developing it would require somebody to read that piece and then that piece and that piece, and eventually, see how they all get tied together. But in these videos, instead of being requiring people to do that much, I like to skate from one level to another level, from one piece to another piece, so that it'll be suggestive that there really is something here that might, if it was all tied together, and if the argument could be developed systematically so that one was compelled to say, yeah, that seems like it holds water, that would be a way of getting people to actually take a look at what I've spent my life developing since, however you want to count it, certainly since 1970, when that book, the subtitle of which is The Problem of Power and Social Evolution, which is part of what we're dealing with in the Politics of Falsehood. That's where for sure I got my calling, and I'm a man on a mission to try to get that idea and all the other ideas that are integrated with it out into the world. Well, thank you for listening. I'll see you tomorrow, I hope.